Hey guys, what is up? It is me, Pagey, here once again with another video on The Flash Season 6, and this will be my review for Episode 6 of The Flash Season 6, otherwise entitled License to Elongate. But of course, before we get into the rest of the video, there will be spoilers, and there is a couple of reveals in this episode. It is mostly, like, I guess what most people call it a filler episode, a fun one, but there is some stuff, especially towards the end and bits in the middle that are very important and a bit spoilery. So, don't continue if you haven't watched it, but if you have watched it, if you enjoyed the video and the episode, why not drop a like in the video to show support, and let me know down in the comment section down below your various thoughts, theories, and expectations going forward, or just from this episode. Now, last episode was obviously the big Cisco episode, where we had like the news that Gypsy had died and Breacher came in and all of that. There's pretty much, I think there's no Cisco in this episode. Was he in the opening scene? I can't remember if he was in the opening scene. If he wasn't, there's no Cisco in this episode at all. Like, he was just AWOL. So yeah, but fair enough. I guess him and Camilla went away for a bit. But obviously we also had Nash Wells and Joe stuck in the tunnel area. So obviously that was going to lead into this episode where right at the end he says, "I know how to save Barry Allen," and that is pretty much where we pick up in this episode. But before we start talking about this episode in particular, this episode was actually directed by Danielle Panabaker, who of course plays Caitlin Snow or Killer Frost. She's actually in this episode more than I thought she would be because she's directing. She's in this episode more than Iris is. I know people are gonna have theories about why Iris wasn't in this episode that much, but I didn't even really notice Iris wasn't in the episode much until the end, because so much of this episode was out of Central City. But yeah, Iris is in she's probably like a minute of this episode altogether, but Iris has a very big role next episode, which is I guess the plant seeded for that big stuff next episode, right at the end of this episode, which we'll talk about when appropriate. But we do start off the episode in the tunnel. We just pick up straight up there with Nash Wells and the group. Now he's showing them where the monitor could be found. He says there's basically like an interdimensional portal in there, and that's where the monitor's based, and pretty much that's what he's doing on every single Earth, is bringing fear. Now, what is inside that area is most likely what we see in the Crisis teaser trailers. I brought this up in like one or two videos before this review, where we saw I think it was like Pariah, Black Lightning, and then some of the Flash people, I think it was Flash, Vibe, and Killer Frost, exactly. So that's probably what's in there. I don't know when that's going to be revealed, whether it's next episode, episode 7, or just before Crisis. We'll have to wait and see, but I'd expect that's what's behind that wall. But it will be interesting to see but I guess when that plays out. Now, like, Wells calls Monitor a false god and stuff, which you'll see if that plays out well when those two possibly meet. But he does need an artifact to dig around the Eternium within the wall, which is what sort of plays out. But we'll talk about that when irrelevant later on. Now, Chester P. Runk plays a decent role in this episode. Arguably, you could say he's probably like the second lead. Oh, maybe not, I guess Barry and Ralph, but plays a pretty sizable role in this episode, seeing he was only in episode 1. But he awakens in Star Labs. We get the "What up, party people?" You gotta love that. Seeing him loose in Star Labs was pretty funny. Maybe a bit too much flossing. I didn't see any dabs though, so credit where credit is due. There was no dabs, but there was maybe like one or two many flosses within Star Labs. I don't think you need. The moonwalking was okay. The flossing, I don't know, that's a bit 2018. But we do see Elongated Man going to be anointed like the new protector of Central City, handing it over from the Flash because of the impending crisis. It comes complete with an official Elongated Man logo, the E&M, which is from the comics, but a case attached to Sue Dearborn. Obviously, she was actually cast in the past week. Natalie Dreyfus will play that character, but we're not going to see her show up until like episode 11 or 12. But this is that's what I'm pretty sure why this episode for the most part exists, is to set more of that up and focus a bit, I guess, how important this Sue Dearborn story is, not necessarily to the whole thing of the season, but to relevant parts of the season with Ralph. So that's why there's such a big focus on it in this episode. But essentially this takes them to Midway City. So Barry actually tags along to sort of speed things up, I guess, so they can get back in time for that handing over of the torch. Now this means tuxedo time, not flash suit time, even though that does come out. It's mostly tuxedo time. Now, Barry and Ralph in the event, it's sort of weird. When Barry is out of the Flash suit, he just seems to be all over the place. It's almost like the Flash suit is like a piece of confident. It just gives him confidence, because he just turns into just this uncoordinated just fool, if you want to call it. Now, Barry does sort of go against Ralph's plan multiple times in this episode. It's almost like, and I'm sure some of you guys might have picked this up, it's almost like they were acting like each other. Like Barry was acting like Ralph sometimes would, and then vice versa. It almost felt like a Freaky Friday sort of scenario. I think that's probably what they were going for. Like Barry was in a situation or scenario that he's uncomfortable with, and never really been in a situation like that because he's usually in the Flash suit. While Ralph has been doing that, especially in the past, 6 months, I guess. He's been doing a lot of this, hanging out with some shady people, trying to get, information or just get some certain leads. So Ralph's fairly comfortable in this, but Barry wasn't, and that sort of showed through the actions of Barry. Now, the criminals at this auction, they go through multiple things where some are drug cartel leaders, mob bosses, various things like that. But the criminals at this auction are here to bid on a thing called the Ring of Fire. Johnny Cash fans, are you out there? Which essentially is this satellite that drops atomic bombs or missiles, I guess, from space. Pretty crazy. One's heading to Central City in this episode just to basically make a statement. So there you go. How coincidental is that? Now, we do see Barry and Ralph taken down. Now, Ralph's just taken down by Remington Meister. That was the guy's name, which is a very typical James Bond-esque villain name. That's obviously what they're going for in this episode. But we, of course, see the return of Ultraviolet. I think you see her briefly in the trailer, and she's in the promo images for this episode. But Ultraviolet's back, so that leads to some connections, which once again we'll talk about towards the end of the episode. I was going to talk about it right now, but it sort of ties into the Iris stuff, so yeah. Now, that speech where they're both tied up, where Barry's in his Flash suit and Ralph's just there, the whole thing where pretty much Ralph said Barry Allen is just as important as the Flash, it was pretty much the message that was being put out there into Barry's head through Ralph, which is, I thought was a great line. It's such a simple line, but it's such a good line, and that scene in general was really good. And that plays out into not the last scene, but I think the second last scene of the episode as well. So Barry and Ralph, when they're together, is pretty much and it's almost like a Wells-Cisco sort of relationship, whenever those two on screen, they're doing a lot of stuff together, it's going to be fun, but also be emotional, and sort of you care about that pairing at the same time. So I think Cisco and Wells, and Cisco and Harry in particular, and then also, of course, Ralph and Barry. I think those two, friendships in the show that, you really, really care about, and they're always great when they're on screen together. But look, the whole concept of this episode, or at least the Barry and Ralph stuff, was silly and very corny, and they really hammed up the corniness in that last scene. They knew exactly what they're doing. I saw people saying, oh my god, this is cringe. It's not cringe when they're intentionally being corny. If they're going for that cam factor, it's actually brilliant. So they had the whole Barry being drunk thing, which I thought, or faking to be drunk, which I thought was pretty funny. The whole Mortal Kombat reference as well, and even the finish him as well. The James Bond music as well, I thought was, it's just corny as hell, but it's also great. It was just a great fight scene. Now, they also used another Muse song, Supremacy, I think was the song that they used. Now, did Muse, the band, get a contract with a CW or something? Because they used one of their songs on Supergirl as well, Supermassive Black Hole, a couple of weeks ago. I think it was actually the first episode of Supergirl this season. Just don't really see that too often. Two songs from the same band, used in just thought it was strange anyway. But Nash and Allegra in this episode actually had some really nice scenes. So there's a crisis scoop is sort of offered to Allegra in order for her to help Nash out with her powers and stuff like that. Now, it was a bit weird how he just accidentally or intentionally, who knows, reveals that Barry is the Flash to Allegra. We'll have to see where that plays out in the next couple of episodes. But Allegra doesn't really want to use her powers in order to sort of distance herself from, the potential or the possibility of becoming like her cousin, who of course is Ultraviolet, which you can understand. Now, eventually she does help. This is through a whole sort of speech, or not a speech, I guess it's just some comforting by Nash. Now, especially towards the end, just the way that Nash was sort of nurturing Allegra and taking care of her. Does anyone have the feeling that maybe Nash lost his daughter, or maybe his entire family, but specifically maybe he had a really close connection to his daughter? Does anyone feel that's the case there? Because he was acting it wasn't acting in a very strange way, but he was acting in a very fatherly way towards her in this episode, especially in that second half of it. So does anyone else think that's true? Because they have said that Nash arguably has the most emotional journey out of any of the Harrison Wells that we've seen on the show so far. So maybe this could be whether it's his whole family or maybe just specifically his daughter. But we'll have to wait and see. Now, Cecile and Chester had some good scenes in this episode. We had like the whole emotion reading scenes with Natalie. It's a bit awkward. You could argue like they didn't really need to be in the episode, and this could be argued as filler content. But I think it was more just to like move Chester into whatever they wanted to do going forward. In the end, it was a happy ending. Now we see Cecile taking like another step forward to her whole like metahuman attorney firm sort of thing. And it also sets up Chester coming back into Star Labs at a later date. Will be interesting if they're using him as a Cisco replacement or something else, but we'll have to wait and see what they do with the Chester character. Now, we of course had the Elongated Man press conference. He gets the official logo like we saw towards the beginning of the episode. Now, Joe and Ralph honor Barry Allen as well, as it is the Flash that is usually honored. But we do see Barry get the Medal of Honor. I thought this was a really nice scene. I'm sure this would have got to a lot of people, just because, the Flash is the one that always gets the credit. Like, how many people would know who Barry Allen is? Not many people, if any. I guess just these close friends. No one outside of that would really know who Barry Allen is, except maybe they would have known about it for maybe like a month back when his mother was murdered. He would have been in the papers and stuff like that. But outside of that, who knows who Barry Allen is? Not many people, but everyone knows who the Flash is in Central City. So I thought it was a really nice scene that Barry Allen gets like a Medal of Honor at the CCPD, even though you could argue, is he ever there? Does he ever work there? Because he's always just at Star Labs working as the Flash. So anyway. But the last scene in the episode, we do see Ralph and Iris. So Iris is in the opening scene and the last scene, and that's it. But yeah, we do see Ralph and Iris. Ralph shows a picture of a guy with a pin, which is the black hole pin. I don't know if it was the same guy that got Esperanza or Ultraviolet from when she was in a coma. I think it was a different guy. But he does have the black hole pin again. And Ralph also gives the info about Ultraviolet being there. So this is going to lead Iris down the whole conspiracy, I guess you could call it, black hole, into into the depths of Central City's underground and trying to dive deeper into who this mystery organization is. So that's going to be very interesting, and we'll set up what we see in the back half and probably who the villain is as well, which is going to be very, very interesting. And it's actually good that they've given Iris that role this season, because it allows her to be actually incorporated into the main plot without being forced, if that makes sense. Like, they're actually using her investigative journalism, I guess, traits to help with the storyline, which is very smart by Eric Wallace. But we of course do see Ramsey Rosso show up, and man, he had a rough couple of weeks, I'll tell you that, because he went from looking like, a bit weird with a couple of black veins, into literally looking like he dived into a tar pit, because I don't know what the hell was going on there. He looks pretty damn creepy. Now, next level creepy, I'd honestly say. He attacks Ralph. Who knows what happens? I did see the first 2 seconds of the promo for next week, and Barry was crying. I turned it off after that because I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to spoil my thoughts in regards to what could happen, but saw Barry crying. So let's see what happens there. But yeah, overall, this was it was filler, but not filler, because it is important to what's happening further on. Like, a filler is when they verse like a villain of the week, and it has no effect going forward. But it really didn't have anything to do with the Bloodwork stuff, which I really think they should have focused on, because there's only 2 episodes left of that. But it does set up the Sue Dearborn stuff as well as the black hole stuff. So a lot of people will think it's filler, and on the base level, when you look at it, it does seem like filler. But when you think about who was in it, and if they come back, which they will, it's not really filler, because it sets up black hole as well as the Sue Dearborn stuff. So I think it was an entertaining episode. Wasn't the best episode of the season, but definitely was not a bad episode. I enjoyed it. Would watch again. But yeah, guys, thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, it'd be awesome if you could drop a like on it to show support. Let me know in the comment section down below your various opinions on what we went over, and I guess what your favorite parts of the episode were. And of course, if you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. And yeah, I'll catch you guys later. Goodbye.